This week we're focusing on building good habits. I want this to be a good semester for you, so that's what we're mainly going to be working on in this course. And I apologize in advance for the sound of my computer overheating. It is ancient. So what is a habit? Habits are the behaviors and activities that you perform unconsciously as a result of frequent repetition. It's something that you've done so often that you don't even think about doing it anymore. It just happens automatically. Sometimes that's a good thing and sometimes that's bad. Successful people have mastered the art of establishing small but effective habits. These are some of the habits of successful people. Peak performers are honest. If they need help, they admit it. If they're too busy to take something on, they say so. They are positive. They focus on what they can do rather than what is outside their control. They're responsible. When they make a mistake, they own up to it immediately, work to correct it, and establish a plan for avoiding that mistake in the future. They are resilient. They see setbacks as learning experiences rather than personal failings or as a sign that something isn't meant to be. They are engaged. They show up. They participate. They think critically. They are willing to learn. Some people don't learn because they refuse to entertain new ideas or challenge their preconceptions. Peak performers know that there's always something new to be learned. They are supportive. They don't tear down others. They are as happy for the success of others as they are for themselves. They are creative problem solvers. They are disciplined. They don't make excuses. If it's time to study, they study. If someone says, "Hey, you want to watch this movie with us?" they say, "As soon as I'm done with my studying." And they are grateful. They focus on appreciating and capitalizing on what they already know or on what they already have rather than obsessing over what they wish they had. There are three main parts of a habit: the trigger, the routine, and the reward. Think of something that you do every day as a habit. Maybe you have a smoking habit and you always smoke after a meal. The trigger is having the meal, the routine is the smoking, and the reward is the feeling that you get after a cigarette. Maybe you always jump right onto social media after a class. The trigger is the class ending. The routine is checking social media, and the reward is the mental escape that you get from that. So what if you want to change a habit? You need to identify your triggers and mindfully establish a new routine. For example, decide that after your class ends, you will briefly look over your notes and then you can get on social media. You might need to set a reminder on your phone for a while at first if your previous habit is very strong. Over time, though, the class ending will trigger note checking rather than social media checking. The only proper way to eliminate bad habits is to replace them with good ones. So again, you need to think about your behaviors. Think about what you do habitually. Then think about when you do it and why you do it. Identify and acknowledge your trigger by figuring out what you tend to be doing right before you engage in your bad habit. Then choose a new routine behavior to occur at that time and establish how you will reward yourself for doing it. Finally, you need to practice, practice, practice. Change does not happen overnight. You will fall off the wagon numerous times, but when that happens, you need to dust yourself off and try again. Maybe you need to make some alterations to your approach, and that's okay too. It will get easier over time. Now let me share with you some tips on establishing new good habits. First of all, be willing to change. Instead of making excuses for staying the same, be willing to change. Focus on the positive instead of letting pessimism prevent you from thinking critically and creatively. Develop specific goals so that you can measure your progress and achievements. Change one habit at a time so that you don't get overwhelmed and discouraged. Start small to help you establish a habit and gain momentum. If you're a couch potato, then don't say, "I will exercise for an hour a day." Start with any amount of exercise, even if it's only a few squats or a 5-minute walk. Small successes will build your confidence and keep you motivated. Use visualization. Describe the kind of person you want to be when you're 85. What will you be doing? What will be your legacy? What is your relationship with your children and grandchildren going to be like? Imagine that you've achieved your life goals. How does that feel? Observe and model others. What are the habits of a successful person you admire? Model that behavior until it starts to feel natural. Be aware of your thoughts and behaviors. You can't change what you don't acknowledge. Reward yourself. Remember getting stickers for good work in elementary school? Figure out some grown-up equivalent of a sticker system for yourself. And finally, be patient and persistent. Again, change doesn't happen overnight. What are some things that might trip us up as we try to change? One is lack of awareness. We simply might not even realize that we have a bad habit. When my mobile device first started giving me weekly updates on how much time I spent on Facebook, I was horrified. Another is fear of the unknown. Maybe we know we should probably seek out tutoring, but we've never done it before, so we don't know what to expect, and that anxiety stops us from going. In situations like that, you might establish a buddy system. Ask someone to go through the process at the same time as you so that you're not doing it alone. Another reason is familiarity and comfort. We don't try to change because we're so comfortable with our current behaviors and circumstances, even if they're not the best or the healthiest. It's like staying in a bad relationship just because you're so accustomed to being with that person. Independence. Sometimes we don't change because we don't want to admit that we need help. Security. Sometimes change involves taking a risk and we might not feel up to that. Tradition. That's a tough one. Breaking with tradition can be an enormous strain if there's pressure from family or society to do something the way it's always been done. Embarrassment. We might be afraid of making a mistake or appearing foolish if something doesn't work. Responsibility. Many people refuse to change because they blame others for their problems instead of taking personal responsibility for their choices. Environment. Some environments are more supportive of change than others. Trying to go vegetarian when you live on your own is easier than if you live in a household full of meat eaters. And finally, cost and difficulty. Some change is easy, but some takes a lot of time, effort, and cost. It would take a lot of motivation and creativity to make that change. My main advice to you when starting a new habit is to start tiny. It's easy to make plans for big changes when it's New Year's Day, but when you're in the middle of a semester with exams and assignments and job commitments, your motivation and energy levels are going to be much lower. The trick is to first focus on establishing a habit, not focusing on how big that habit is. Make it something so tiny that you can do it even if you're feeling exhausted or rushed. What is a tiny habit? A tiny habit is some personal behavior that you do at least once a day, takes less than 30 seconds, and requires very little effort. For example, do you ever leave the dentist office telling yourself that you are going to floss your teeth from now on, but then you don't? Start tiny. In the beginning, your tiny habit will be to floss just one tooth every day. Well, hold on a minute, you might ask, what good is flossing just one tooth? Well, remember that although eventually you want to work up to flossing all your teeth every day, your focus right now is to establish a habit of flossing. Once that habit is established and you floss without thinking about it, then you can scale it up. Also, there's no rule that you have to stop at one tooth. If you floss your one tooth and then feel like flossing a few more, go for it. But you have to floss at least one tooth. And if you just do that, you've earned your reward. Here are some more examples of tiny habits. Some tiny habits related to studying might be to log into Blackboard. Not even do anything while you're in there, just log in. Open your textbook. Not even read it, just open it. Put your hand on your planner. Maybe you'll write something in it, maybe not. It doesn't matter right now. Some cleaning examples are throw away one item, put one piece of clothing in the hamper, wash one dish. For health and wellness, you might do 2 push-ups, take 3 deep meditative breaths, or just look at a vegetable. Again, if after you've done your tiny habit you feel like doing more, go ahead, but you get your reward just for doing your tiny habit. Also, you need to decide what your trigger or antecedent is going to be. In other words, in addition to choosing what your habit will be, you need to decide when you're going to do it. For example, after I pour my coffee, I will open my textbook. After I eat my dinner, I will wash one dish. After I take my shower, I will take 3 deep breaths. Here's what this does. Over time, it will start to feel natural to do these things at these times. Eventually, it will become so natural that you do it without even thinking about it. And just like that, you've established some new effective habits. And of course, once it's a habit to open your textbook, then you can start to scale it up. There will be the first time you open your textbook after pouring your coffee, which might feel weird. Then you will do this every day for a period of time, and for a while it will still feel weird. Eventually, opening your textbook after pouring your coffee will feel natural and you keep doing it. Then it will become so natural that you do it automatically without even thinking about it. At this point, scale it up. After pouring your coffee, open your textbook and read a paragraph. Once that feels natural, open your textbook and read a section, read a chapter, take some notes, whatever. But now you've established a study habit. If mornings aren't a good time for this, choose a different trigger. Maybe it's when you sit down for your lunch break. Maybe it's when you get to the bus stop. Anything that you do daily is a potential trigger. Find out what works for you. This process will be the basis for your personal growth project. So start brainstorming what academic tiny habits you think you should establish and what you hope might eventually come from that.